just going to tell you a bit about the work that we do at CEMVO, and particularly the Ethnic Minority Environmental Network. And then Akis is going to give us, you know, her take on what community climate action is, you know, and why it's important. We've got a really, really great case study of a group that we worked with last year, which will hopefully then bring some of that to life, hopefully show how some of that community climate action actually works in practice rather than just in theory. And then at the end, in time-honored tradition, we have a kind of top 10 tips section, which we put together, which I'm sure none of which will be completely unfamiliar to any of you. It's not reinventing the wheel or anything like that, but hopefully those top 10 tips will just give you a little bit of guidance of how we approach things. And as I say, we don't always get it right, but hopefully the way that we approach things might allow you to look at the way that you approach things through a slightly different lens. This was, I'll just tell you a little bit about this quickly. This was a fantastic event that we did a couple of weeks ago. We took the network that we run, the Ethnic Minority Environmental Network. We invited everyone to come on a guided nature walk around Pollock Park in Glasgow. It's sort of, you know, very large, I'm sure many of you will know it, large sort of like urban park in Glasgow with what can best be described as a sort of checkered history in terms of its links to kind of colonialism and exploitation. And ACUS delivered this amazing kind of guided walk, walking around the park, looking at the kind of the colonial history of the house and the sort of the grand masters who had kind of run this institution. You know, some really nasty parts of Glasgow's history, if you like. And then juxtaposing that with where we are now, and where we are now in terms of the sort of the fight that we have against for climate justice, essentially, and trying to sort of position what went wrong before with what is going wrong now, if you like. And I think there are obviously lessons to be learned from that. But it was a beautiful event. We were expecting about 30 people, and we had about 50 people turned up in the end. Which the National Trust for Scotland were not terrifically happy about, but that's, you know, that's what are you going to do? Yeah, a really, really nice event, which I think people got a lot out of. And that's really sort of, I suppose, what we're trying to do at MN. So there's a little bit of blurb up on the screen, which hopefully you can see, but, you know, the way that I would always describe the work that we do is basically we're trying to amplify the voices of ethnic minority groups and organisations who are working to address climate change and fighting for climate justice in Scotland. So that's our sort of raison d'etre, if you like. And we do that through a number of different ways. The network exists as quite a sort of a loose arrangement, if you like. We have a fortnightly newsletter that goes out. We're always happy to share people's updates, job ads, you know, calls for responses to strategies, anything like that. Hopefully we can push that out to our network of people who are working in this area. We have about 350 people that we would broadly sort of class as being in the network. We run a lot of events. So obviously this is a great opportunity, this event, but you know, we have a sort of summer networking event coming up on the 22nd of June. If any of you are in Glasgow, it'd be lovely to see you there. Everyone's always very welcome to attend our events. And we also respond to a lot of policy consultations. So at a broader level, we're strategic partners of the Scottish Government. So we work hand in hand with them to try and push forward, if you like, the policy agenda that our network is calling for at the highest possible level of government. So MN, the Ethnic Minority Environmental Network, is part of a broader charity, which Akis and I work for, called CEMVO. And, you know, it's one of those things in the third sector, obviously, it's just acronyms a go-go. So we've got kind of MN first, and then we've got CEMVO. CEMVO is the Council of Ethnic Minority Voluntary Organisations. That's the larger charity that we're employed by. CEMVO's been around for about 20 years. It's a national intermediary organisation. So it exists really to build the capacity of the ethnic minority voluntary sector in Scotland. And it's not just environmental work that we do at CEMVO. It's we do a lot of financial capability, a lot of governance training, a lot trying to get people back into work. But as I said before, you know, Akis and I and our colleague Christopher, we work as part of the environment team. And I think that the starting point that we always have as a baseline for that, if you like, is that the groups that we work with, the ethnic minority-led organisations who are working in the climate sector, they are very, very engaged with these issues. these are not groups who are indifferent or ambivalent in any way about the climate crisis and what's going on. They're groups who are often perhaps diaspora groups, or people who have friends and families who are living in other parts of the world that are being directly affected by climate change now. And that's why I think they have special insight into the fight for climate justice that we're trying to push for, but also why it's extremely important that their voices are heard and are listened to, at the highest echelons of government, if you like. So I suppose in many ways, we're sort of trying to come at it from both angles. We're working with the grassroots organizations to try and give them a boost and to try and sort of lift them up. But then we're also working with the mainstream environmental organizations, WWF, Nature Scott, YSPB, Woodland Trust, you name it, to try and instill in them the truth that their organizations will be improved by attracting a more diverse and as broad an audience as possible within the Scottish environmental landscape.
Hi everyone, I'm Akis. I'm the Environment Officer here at CEMVO Scotland, and I facilitate the Ethnic Minority Environmental Network with Andrew, and that was a great introduction. Before we start talking about diversifying the climate action that we might be undertaking at the moment, I wanted to take one step back and just discuss and be on the same page about what we think climate action is, because in Scotland, we have such a fragmented green sector and we're all doing all these amazing things all around the country. And it tends to be all these eclectic sort of things in the green sector, that there are some people who are regenerating ponds and there are people who are hosting coffee chats on nature and climate justice. And all of those things do come under the umbrella of climate action. So what really is it that we call climate action, and why do we want people involved in it? So I think that's a really good place to start. Climate action is part of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals set up by the United Nations in 2015 that some of you would know about. It literally is take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And climate action is just as simple as that. But we tend to make it slightly more complicated, as I would in the next 30 seconds. I like to think about climate action in 3 words, and it really just explains the gist of climate action. It is a strategy, an effort, and an action. I think climate action needs to be strategic, because if you're working in flood risks, or if you're working with nature loss, or you're working on issues such as just transition or climate justice that are so forward-looking, so futuristic, something that needs a proper plan, all climate action needs to be strategic, no matter how small it is, how simple it is. It really needs to be strategic enough so it's evidence-based and it's consulted by all relevant stakeholders. So even when we're fully well-willed actions, they do not harm nature, do not send out the wrong messaging. It's really important that we're being strategic about everything that we do in the green sector, because it really is something that could have an impact beyond our project's life. It is an effort. All climate action is undertaken to increase the adaptive capacity of our natural, social, and economic systems around us. Climate action doesn't need to be that complicated, but it needs to answer some sort of an environmental need. And so it needs to be an effort that we're able to undertake to answer our needs as a society and the nature's needs in a way that we're increasing our capacity and our adaptation to climate resilience. And climate action is simply any action that we can undertake as a single person or as a community that would build our resilience and then our society's resilience to climate change and its repercussions in the future. Now, all of that makes climate action sound slightly more complicated than it needs to be at the scale that we're working at. Climate action really doesn't need to be that complicated, and it doesn't need to be very difficult. It needs to be any action that we can take at a small scale to enhance the work that we're already doing and using all the skill sets around us. All of you have joined this call because all of you know that there is space to include a lot of people and essentially everyone in the sector at the moment. And we're all trying to make more of that space for everyone to come and join climate action and come and undertake climate action. But what I think Andrew and I have experienced at MN, and this is what we will talk about later. Climate action really just comes down to our messaging and how we're talking about it. And what we are saying to people is climate action. A lot of people around us are already undertaking some form of climate action. They're already being strategic about if it's a kitchen garden, if they're planting rainwater harvesting planters in their backyard, if they're working with frogs in their area. People are already doing these things are all around you, but it's about naming it and calling it out as climate action. And that really is our job as people within the green sector, to be able to enhance the things that people are already doing. And that really is a part of climate action, is to name it and celebrate it and do it again and again, and do it in a strategic way, so that we're actually having a long lasting impact on our nature and on our climate. In terms of diversifying the work that we're already doing, it doesn't really need to be diversifying into race or diversifying into ethnic minorities. It really needs to be, how many people can you reach as a single organization, as a single person, geographically in your personal area, in your proximity? Are you able to reach all the people around you who need to be involved in the work that you're doing, whether it's even planting 100 saplings for trees? Are you reaching the right number of people? Are you reaching all the people around you that should be involved in that project? And I think if we start with that idea, it becomes slightly simpler to walk down the line of how do we diversify from there. It's about just reaching everyone. And I do strongly believe that everyone cares about the environment, and it really just boils down to how we're messaging it. And climate action is such a useful concept, and it really is such a positive tone to take towards climate change. Because within the green sector, we do tend to live in this doomsday mentality, don't we? We're constantly worrying that there's going to be an apocalypse, there's going to be a bad flood again, there's going to be a forest fire, there's going to be something bad happening sometime soon if we don't do this now. But if we are able to reverse that, and if we're able to talk to people in an optimistic sense, in a sort of futuristic sense, in a sense that if you do this, it's going to make your life better, it's going to make your children's life better, it's going to make your sister's life better. People do tend to care. People want people to live a good, healthy life. People don't want their friends and family members to be in debt because they wanted to add renewable energy heat installation in their house. Nobody wants that. We all want to just transition to net zero, but it really is about how we're talking about climate change, and climate action is a very important and useful terminology for that. That's why we encourage people to use words like community climate action when we're talking about the work that we're doing in the green sector. So if you are doing that, it is good practice, I think, in the green sector to be naming the work that we're doing as climate action, because it does help people think about the green sector in a more proactive and optimistic sense. So last year, we were really, really fortunate to be partners on WWF's Mobilizing Community Climate Action Fund. And through that, we were able to fund a few charities and a few groups across Glasgow City to undertake some sort of climate action. And it was actually very surprising that all the people who came and applied for the fund were people who have never heard about the green sector. They don't use words like climate action. They didn't know what it was. They simply just came for the money, because people need the money to undertake so many different projects. But over the course of the project, during the presentations that we gave like this, people really did start to engage with the terminology of climate action. And one of the most wonderful things that came out of it was something undertaken by the Wing Hong Elderly Centre in Glasgow City Centre. It's a place that I think if you're in Glasgow, you should go and visit these people, and you should go and see this. With the little grant money that they got, they made a community kitchen garden in the elderly center. Now, it answered a lot of environmental needs. It added a green space in sort of like a concrete jungle that's become of the city center. People were able to bring oriental vegetables to Glasgow City. People were able to give sort of pass down traditional ecological knowledge in so many different ways. I think they were able to engage with oriental recipes and teach them to young children who came to the elderly center, and also to young people. And the kitchen garden is still fully functional. There's a beautiful YouTube video filmed by WWF's team on it, which we will obviously send you all the link to. It is something worth seeing. And it answered so many societal needs, so many social needs for a small community center for this Chinese elderly center, and also the people who were in that center, and also environmental and nature needs. And they were able to consult with people to know exactly what seeds to plant and what will be good for the nature around you. And that's a very important part of climate action. As I said before, it needs to be evidence-based. It needs to be consulted with the relevant stakeholders so we're not harming the nature around us. I think this project was able to work solely based on the positive messaging around climate action. And the more people that we're able to talk to in a positive sense, in a more optimistic sense, the more people from various age groups, sexualities, and races would want to come and engage with climate change. Because as I said before, I think everybody cares about the environment and really is about how we're talking about it, right?
But I think the first thing that we always think about when we're considering any kind of project or how we can support a project is how can we assess what the audience is going to be? You know, who are the people who are going to benefit from this? Who are the people that we should be getting involved in this? And I think it's important to know that audience and to have that in mind, but it's also important never to assume that you know everyone who's going to be interested. This was something that came up, you know, in the breakout rooms, is sort of, you know, how do you break out of that, the kind of the usual suspects kind of mentality. And I think it's the reason for that is that you never know until you ask who is actually going to be interested in being involved. And I think that the sort of strategy that we would use for that, if you like, is to you know, look at who you know you're going to get in touch with about something, and then try and have a think about, well, are there other groups out there that, you know, that we can spread the word to, who we might be able to use also as partners on this. So perhaps if you normally liaise with your local town council or your community council to work on a project, you could be thinking, well, I wonder if there are other groups we could connect with. Maybe there are faith groups in the area who would be interested in being involved. Maybe there are groups for specific demographics, like groups for young people, like scouts or guides or something like that. So just trying to always think about how you can broaden the reach of that audience while still making it relevant to them. I think that's the key thing. But we have, you know, and rightly or wrongly, I suppose I would say, our attitude is always to be positive, you know, and we know that climate change is a very, very daunting subject. It instills a great sense of fear and apprehension in lots of people. But our approach is always that if you focus on the negative, it will at some level lead to people simply switching off. So, you know, and it's simple messaging change, I suppose, is rather than saying, you know, we need to restore nature or our future is at threat. You know, instead, we would want to be saying, you know, imagine how beautiful our community could be if we planted more wildflower meadows. You know, it's just that simple twist in the messaging. And I know, you know, Akis, through her work with, you know, students and younger people, knows there's a great issue at the moment with eco-anxiety, you know, with people who are really fearful, you know, of what the future might hold, that actually it's stopping them taking action. And I think that's what we need to, our approach, as I say, is always just to switch that up and just be positive rather than just always looking at the worst case scenario, I suppose. And something that we always try to do, number 3, is to sort of piggyback existing networks. You know, we're a network, SCAN is a network. There are a lot of networks out there, you know, and, you know, it can sometimes feel like, you know, spending all of our times in network meetings rather than actually getting things done. But I think there's sometimes an instinct when new groups or new projects are being set up to try and sometimes reinvent the wheel with this stuff. And our approach is always that it's much better to use the wheels that are already there. So, you know, yeah, if you're setting up a project, yeah, brilliant. You know, set up a Facebook group or whatever for your project, that's great. But don't forget about existing, you know, town-wide or region-wide Facebook groups that will already exist. And, you know, where it's appropriate, you can be sharing, you know, online content to those. And also offline, you know, there are always places, you know, notes boards and, you know, poster sites and things like that, where you can kind of use existing places that people are going for information to try and spread the word about the projects that you're delivering. I think having a clear message in what you're trying to do is absolutely vital, and it's a difficult line to walk, and I appreciate that, and it's something that we struggle with, and that we, you know, that we always have to try and work on with the projects that we're supporting. But it's easy to understand, it's easy to assume a level of understanding from your audience that isn't always there. And I think people are very nervous about being patronizing or being condescending, and so they sort of think, well, everyone's going to know about X, Y, and Z. You know, everyone knows that the pH level in the river is at intolerable levels, you know, we have to intervene, kind of thing. But actually there's a good chance that maybe people don't know about pH levels in the river, or about soil erosion, or about, you know, a lot of the things that are important and that you might know about. But I think it's about starting at a more basic level and then trying to build the capacity of your group internally, so that they then have the tools to be able to explain that to their colleagues, their friends, their family, so that the level of understanding across the piece is then raised up through that messaging. And of course, something, you know, you would expect us to say, and this sort of goes to the heart of everything that we do, I suppose, at the work that we do with AMN, but it's just to be mindful of cultural sensitivities that come into play at things. And I mean, you know, the obvious ones, I suppose, are not scheduling events for Friday prayers, or for, you know, or for Sunday church services, or for times that, you know, are, you know, specific religious holidays, or you know, cultural events that are going to mean that you're putting an unconscious barrier in the way of people participating in the work that you're doing. I don't think we never meet groups who are deliberately saying we don't want ethnic minority groups involved. You know, we've never seen that, but we've seen plenty of groups who have sort of just maybe not thought it through quite enough, and it ends up being something that then they're like, oh, right, okay, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done it that way. This is something that I think we can help with, you know. So I wouldn't want people just to be sort of starting from scratch thinking, oh no, now I have to learn every religious holiday under the sun, and I need to work out when all these things are going to go on. Just come to us and ask, you know, if you want to run dates past us, or periods in the year past us, or whatever, that you think you want to do something. If you check with us, then, and we don't know all the answers either, but we'll check with our people, we'll check with our networks here, and we can try and give you a sense of whether you're on the right track, or whether there might be, yeah, as I say, unconscious barriers that then that's placing in the way of people.
To start off with the sixth one, it just says you're never too small or too big. I think it's very easy for us to think that if we're applying for micro funding, or sort of a funding for just £200, it's easy to think that what is this going to do? What's this going to contribute to? Is this worth it? It really is about being strategic about it in climate action, and really thinking, if I'm getting this extra £200, can I buy a machine that I really, really need, that will give me the longevity in this project? And the same goes for applying for these larger fundings. Don't think that you're applying for something way bigger than you're capable of. Try to do everything that you can, but also just be strategic about it. Don't try to get mixed up in trying to explain to yourself what size of an organization am I, what size of a group I am. Just do whatever you can, but be strategic about it. Always consult the people around you, but don't get muddled up in the technicalities like that. Wanted to talk about change and continuity. It's really, really important to remember that we're in the green sector. We're talking about climate change. Everything is changing around us. Scotland is rapidly transforming with its ambitious goals of net zero in 2045. We have a plethora of policies coming out. We have so many more council members concerned with the environment at the moment. And it's not just political. There are more and more organizations changing the way that they work. There are so many new schemes out there. So I think we all know that everything is really, really rapidly changing. And the one thing we can do as organizations, as constituted groups, is to remember that things are going to change. And we need to be ready for that. We need to continue working in the sector and working on the things that we care about. And if there are a couple of people in your organization and in your group who are troublemakers and trying to change too much, try to understand what they're trying to do, and try to go along with things, and try to be slightly more open-minded with your stakeholders, with your networks, in terms of changing things, changing the way we talk about things, and just being open to that. because I think we all think that it's going to be necessary in like maintaining your continuity and longevity in the green sector. I think this third point is really important when we're talking about diversifying and widening our reach, is about thinking about your story. I think that's something that's helped MN a lot, is just having a story that we have to tell to people about what MN is, why is it here, why do we exist, what, and simplifying that story. Really, if you're starting a new project, I think every project does start from a need, from a necessity, and really simplifying what that need is, what that story is. And that really, in terms of funding, that story really does help you catch funders' eyes. That really does help you brand yourself, try to understand yourself as well as a group, as an organization, as a project, what you're trying to achieve, because your roots can tell you a lot about what you need to achieve in this project. So really, I think it's a really good exercise for all constituted groups and organizations to always sit down and think about what is our story, why are we here, why are we doing what we're doing, and why did these two managers start this organization. It's always important to know that, and also talk about that with people, put that message across, people relate to stories. Fourth point is about don't let technical details scare you. I think that's happened to us a lot. I think that happens to all the groups out there, especially in the green sector where so many changes are happening. There's lots of technicalities out there, and especially if you're a group, if you're an unconstituted group, turning into a constituted group, setting up a governance, setting up a board, finding trustees, finding a funder, all of those bureaucratic details are really, really scary, and they can be so daunting for any group that's trying to achieve something great. But it's important to remember that there's so much help out there, and it goes into the last point as well. There are so many people out there who want more work done in the sector. There's so many people out there who want you to be carrying out this work simply because they can't. So there is a need for you to be here. There's a need for you to be doing this project. So don't let that bureaucracy and those technicalities stop you from doing the work that you need to do. Ask for help. Organizations like CEMVO exist to help people turn into, we have a social enterprise support team. Organizations like this are literally here to help you learn your way through these processes. And if you're struggling, to help you and be a helping hand over there in certain processes, MN is here to help people, work better in the green sector and get the support that they need in the green sector.